Well, good morning, everybody. Glad to see such a big crowd here, but no surprise given the panelists that we have lined up here. I'm Beth Schultz. I am the Enterprise Connect Program Co-Chair, and I'm excited to kick off our Enterprise Connect 2019 Main Stage program with these gentlemen here and our female representative from Google Voice. Anyways, these folks can really help us understand how communications and collaboration are likely to evolve in the digital future. And hopefully they'll lay some groundwork and questions for you that you might ask of your strategic vendors this week and for some technologies to examine down on the expo floor. Because one thing is for certain, rules are changing as we go along, and knowing where to turn next is a huge challenge for all of you. So here to help us guide your way forward into the cloud-centric, software-driven, mobile-first world we increasingly find ourselves in, we have, first of all, my co-moderator, Jim Burton. Jim is the president and founder of CTI Link. Is that correct, Jim?
Just be CT Link. It used to be stand for Computer Telephony Link, and now I call it Cloud Technology Link.
And next to Jim, we have Vic Verma, who is the CEO of 8x8.
Hello.
We have Sri Srinivasan, who is the SVP and GM of WebEx Teams, Meeting and Devices with Cisco. Smita Hashim, who is the Product Director with Google Voice. Bob Davis, Corporate Vice President, Microsoft 365 Engineering, with Microsoft, obviously. Gordon Litley, Managing Director of Business Communications with Verizon. And Alan Mazurek, who is the CEO of Vonage. So Jim, why don't you kick us off here with the opening question?
Great, thanks. And before I get into that question, I wanted to give you a little insight as to what our objectives are here today. We know that many of you in the audience are chartered with finding out solutions, technology solutions for your company. And that in that process, you need to look for information to help you make an informed decision. That's one of the reasons you go to No Jitter, and that's particularly one of the reasons you're here. You're on a buyer's journey trying to find information. We actually at UC Strategies, which is one of the business I'm involved in, changed our name last year to BC Strategies to kind of broaden the definition and to provide content for you to help you on a buyer's journey. So what we're hoping can happen today, you're going to be able to hear from these people on the stage what their vision, what their direction is to help you in your decision-making process. We've spent a lot of time, Beth and I have spent a lot of time with each of these individuals to kind of look at where's the industry headed so we could be asking the questions we hopefully that you would be asking. And so we're going to start off with what we think is probably one of the paramount questions. I think probably the most important question will be the one Beth will be asking a little bit later. But the first question is starting off with, our industry has gone through an evolution. Are we at a point now where we're looking for a single solution from a single vendor, or are we looking for best-of-breed solutions, meaning we have to have multiple vendors? So Vic, we'll start with you.
So obviously I'm somewhat biased, but about 5 years ago, 8x8 started on a journey where we believed that all forms of communication would come together. Voice, video, text, contact center, machine learning, AI, it would all be together, one platform, so-called one throat to choke. And in a weird way, it's back to the future. If you think back to the Cisco and Avaya legacy systems, that's exactly what they did. And then the cloud vendors started to break it into piece parts, and I think it's all evolved back where it's coming all together, so you literally have one platform. And it comes down to, I mean, how many people here have mobile phones? And if you have a mobile phone, use the same phone to do text, use the same phone to do video, FaceTime or whatever, and use the same phone to do voice, and also use it to do e-commerce. So in essence, that concept of one platform and one integrated solution is the way we operate, and I think communications is no different, and that's the way people are going to operate. The key is to make sure, though, that the stuff is not just good enough, it gets very close to best of breed. The last people that tried to create a best-of-breed solution in this industry, or in a related industry, the one that you talked about, was in the computer PC industry, where IBM basically got Microsoft and Intel as partners to create a best-of-breed solution. And I think that solution is now called Lenovo. So I think it is one integrated solution, and I think that's the way the industry is going to evolve.
Well, Sri, It's interesting because as we're putting this question together, the company that probably has the largest breadth of product is Cisco. So where do you find yourself in answering that question?
I think we believe that it's a mix. It's not a winner-take-all decision. We believe that most of us as software vendors obviously would like it to be all on us. We are increasingly driven by end-user choice, end-user experience. So that end-user experience is leading to different functions being done by the best. And in many ways, what we see today in organizations is experience driven by culture. Culture of how people work matters most. And hence, it's upon us as organizations to serve the 30+ SaaS applications we see on an average in an enterprise, make them interoperate well. And while we'd like it to all to be from one of us, I think we have inherently a responsibility to make sure there is high degrees of interop, high degrees of reduction in context switching for a worker. And we believe experience shall decide the mix. And we are headed towards a mix world.
Great, great.
Smita, you come at this from a different perspective. I mean, Google with its legacy of public cloud infrastructure and starting from the productivity suite standpoint. So what's your take on this, best of breed versus complete solution question?
Yeah, I think so. Google, we do have the productivity DNA, and we launched our product suite is called G Suite, and it has all these products. Gmail started in 2004, Google Docs, Drive, and lately we have added Hangouts Meet, which is for video conferencing chat. So we've been adding the communication capabilities, if you will, and Google Voice is the latest edition. This is the product that I manage. When we think of communication, the intent of communication we see as being collaboration. Mm-hmm. And collaboration happens wherever users are at in the moment. So if you look at a product like Google Docs, so collaboration, and for those who are not familiar with it, Google collaboration is built right in. So in Google Docs, when you add a comment, you can comment in people, it'll send an email, it'll come in your email. If you want, you can chat right from it. So we think of communication and collaboration as going hand in hand. And what we are seeing is for Google Voice, which is a newest product, we see a lot of interest from customers. So we are seeing, especially the customers who are already onto a platform, they show up to 3 times higher preference for a product. In our Google Docs, 74% of the time is spent collaborating. So I think when folks here are thinking about moving to the next generation of solutions, if you will, you should look at the broader picture, which is communication and collaboration and how to tie it together. I do feel like it's still early days, and we see customers evaluating, assessing, making up their mind. The shift is real, and it's massive, but I think it'll take us all time to figure out what makes sense.
Okay. Bob, you have a similar starting point from the productivity standpoint. We imagine that your views are relatively similar to Google Voices?
Yeah, in fact, I'd say, at least for the first 4 panelists, I think we agree that, I was just recently talking to a CIO, and he summed it up better than I ever could. He said, look, what I'm looking for is best of platform, not best of breed. I think Vic mentioned that, something very similar. And for IT, they're doing that because in a world of cloud services where endpoints in the cloud are constantly kept up to date, it's kind of a fool's errand to try to cobble together a bunch of disparate solutions. For end users, achieving things is a team sport. And in order to work in teams, people of all kinds of diverse perspectives need to be included, not just the people sitting at the desk, but the people out on the front line, et cetera. And having a common platform with which they can communicate is absolutely key. Furthermore, there's a ton of cognitive overhead in having a lot of different tools, especially communication tools. And using a platform, you can reduce the overload that that individuals can have. And then lastly, kind of echoing the comments of the panelists thus far, you know, if you think that there's going to be one platform to rule them all and it's going to be a closed wall garden, you're just naive. And so making sure that third-party applications and the types of work that, as was just mentioned, so that people can work in the flow. Working in the flow doesn't mean working with just one single platform. It means bringing other third-party apps and things together to help customers achieve.
Gordon, Verizon has a little bit of everything under the sun, right? So what are your perspectives on this?
Yeah, so I think we would say the answer is yes to both questions. So you, as business applications and traditional communications applications are increasingly coming together, having common platforms is certainly something that the IT organizations are looking for, because just like any consumer, they want simplicity in how they manage their business. But at the same time, as you move up market, I agree with Dan's comments that you have to have the ability to integrate best of breed, either on a platform level or at an application level, and it becomes a little bit more complex as you get up market, because you've got, you know, large companies, massive business units, oftentimes built through integration. So that integration of best of breed platforms is going to stay at the high end. But I would say we agree with the broader trend that simplicity and especially as business applications and comms applications integrate, it becomes simpler.
Alan, I'm interested in your comment because I saw you nodding your head, kind of agreeing with everyone here, but I also know that you've gone out and made a lot of acquisitions so you could be the best of breed platform. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the cloud by its nature lends itself to the ability to go best of breed. My view is it's almost like a false premise in terms of the question, because communications and collaboration are interlinked. And the fact that now the modes of communication, or by virtue of the way in which you collaborate, now are all IP-based communications, they're going to be, they're tied in together by their nature. It's a common technology. So our view has been that it starts with a platform, and that whether someone is going to buy the finished solution from a communications vendor, or at the end of the day, it's simply a software platform where that same communications functionality with all the interoperability of the modes of communication based on IP, whether that's simply sitting underneath someone else's portal, if you will, whether it's G Suite or whether it's Teams or whether it's Salesforce or whatever, it's really up to the enterprise to decide. And it goes back also to all the other workflow integrations, where, again, where communications has come from, where because they've been proprietary networks, the sort of those flows have been lost. Now that it's all IP-based, they now are unified and now can be seamlessly integrated into all the other workflow tools. So that you have this linkage between how I'm having customer communications into my employee-based tools, into all my workflow tools. How it evolves in terms of best of breed, best of platform, our own view is it is a platform, and it's, again, how it gets deployed. And we think the more modern architectures, because it's again built from a microservices, communication microservices, whether someone takes an element of it and they, you know, program it into something else, or take the entire application because they want to have some PBX-centered solution or a contact-centered solution, it doesn't really matter. They're going to enter, you know, whatever their need is. It's just use cases at the end of the day. And again, you're going to have the choice as an enterprise either to, you know, sort of take the full solution or kind of buy it in a way in an a la carte approach.
I think you've just given a great segue into Beth's next question.
I try.
Well, I mean, and the question is really, as you mentioned, like, do you take communications and you integrate it into, you know, communications first applications and integrate those into business and productivity capabilities, Or do you take a business application kind of first approach and integrate communications and collaboration, as a commoditized feature and function of your business applications? We know what your viewpoint is on that, basically. We just told us, right?
Yeah.
Others? Vic, how about you?
So two parts. I mean, one, as I indicated, I think the core communication, collaboration, I think everybody all agrees, they've all come together. It's just the way we communicate as people, where it's voice, video, text, and it's seamless. It's one click, and how you make it seamless is absolutely the key. The second part, which is going to be interesting, is I actually think that both areas are going to exist. You will have standalone communication. The question I asked, I think just as a general point of reference, how many people have a mobile phone? And do you use the mobile phone as the center of your communication? Do you use it to do voice? Do you use it to do text? Do you use it to do FaceTime or whatever is the Google equivalent of FaceTime? Do you do that? Yes. Why? Because it's a standalone communication device, and you know what? Enterprises are no different. Now, every once in a while, it also makes sense to absolutely integrate it with all other relative workflows and business apps, et cetera, so you can get significant improvement in productivity. But I think as human beings, communication is so core that even if you basically embed it into different devices, you will always have a standalone communication platform, because that's what we are geared towards. And it will be a platform. It will integrate with all the relevant apps so you have context. But communications and collaboration as a standalone platform, I think, is here to stay. And it's evidenced just by the fact that none of us is giving up our iPhone or our Android phone or whatever phone that we have just so we can do an embedded phone call in a relevant e-commerce app or something like that.
I see a lot of nods. Anybody that disagrees with that statement?
Sri, what about you?
So I do concur with what Vic had to say. Where we are headed is, the industry shifts, if we see, we're going from a task-based world to a group outcome-based world, to a team collaboration world. And a team collaboration is not only about the art of communication, it's art of communication in the context of a business process.
Mm-hmm.
And hence, it's going to be more and more where, even though we had these discrete communication tools, some of them interleaving, we called it best of breed platforms, we see, at least I see, the need for these communication capabilities to be embedded in business process in context. When we say in context, it's not willy-nilly. The act of, let's say, a customer service, a sales rep talking to a prospect in Salesforce, it's not just having a chat and a video there, but engaging it within the activity itself, within the code. So converting that system of record into a system of engagement, that's where we're headed. Now, that also means that a discrete communication tool and that Salesforce tool, different user personas are going to see different surface areas.
Right.
And those are all going to interoperate together. That's where I see it all headed.
I see violent agreement in the panel. So,
Great. I'll totally agree with that. I would add, that regardless of whether you take a communications approach first or business applications approach, both have to be done right. So we can debate, which approach you take first. But I like Vic's analogy to the mobile device, is that's your single point of communication. And as we become a more mobile workforce, I know we're going to get into mobility a little bit later, but that is a classic example of where the business application and the traditional communications have to come together, right? So if you think about 5G is coming and how that's going to dramatically change the way we use that device that Vic is referring to, how you integrate that rich content in the business application with the voice is going to be critical. So, and I also agree. I think Syria was saying that there's going to be plenty of room for multiple players. I think there's going to be a lot of providers in that space, whether you're taking it from a communication standpoint or a business application standpoint.
Alan, you had a comment. I think.
Yes, I think about it a little bit differently. And I guess I don't fully agree with the example about the device, because I always sit back and say, this isn't a phone. It's simply an internet-connected device that happens to have a speaker and a microphone, and video capabilities as well. So my point is, the fact that the communications are all unified in a common tech, it's just software. And then the communications, regardless of mode, are all unified in a common technology. These are just simply portals, if you will, by which to access it from. So your point, Jim, that you had asked before was, are we going to have a standalone communications app? The way I think about that is a knowledge worker is going to turn to the communications app
right.
on a discrete basis to do communications, collaboration stuff. Yes, that will be here, but I think what you'll see is we don't need another portal as knowledge workers in this world. Again, Microsoft and G Suite and Salesforce and others of the major web properties are really vying to be the knowledge workers' homepage. So I think what you'll find is these will coexist, but increasingly you'll see the functionality of whether, go back to UC or CC or core collaboration or what have you, sitting underneath somebody else's UI.
Maybe.
Because at the end of the day, it's just functionality within what a knowledge worker is doing all day, every day. So I think, again, the fact that this is a portal that we use to get on to use those things, it's not so much it's the portal, this is a physical portal. But if I'm sitting in Salesforce all day, every day, do I want to turn somewhere else to go do contact center? Do I want to turn somewhere else to go do communications? If I'm sitting in G Suite or I'm sitting in Teams, the same thing. That's where I think the fact that it's, again, a platform of communications under the cover and can be deployed anyway, I think you're going to see more of that happening than having sort of asking somebody to say, go to a discrete portal.
Yeah, if I can add to
Absolutely,
Yeah.
that. So I think some of the trends which Alan is talking about, which is as we move to this cloud world, being able to access your productivity communication applications from anywhere, anytime really becomes critical. I sometimes feel like the way we talk about communications is a bit narrow because communications has to go with collaboration,
Right.
and that happens everywhere.
Right.
So I think as people are mapping out their journey, I feel like just thinking about cloud native, being able to provide that capability, whether it's your laptop, whether it's your desktop, whether it's your mobile phone, from wherever you are at, is really important. And I think it's also important to look at the whole suite of applications, your business applications, productivity applications, and how do you link them together. I do think all organizations, I think the statistics are an organization moving to the cloud is using 30, 40 applications at least, and they will come from a variety of vendors. I think it's just more it's a matter of figuring out how your business flows are integrated and what's the best experiences which you can provide.
Also, I think is if you're on this portal, this physical device, you're on it either just doing communications, you're just in the native dialer, but all too frequently, you're using it in an app or a website.
Right.
So whether, again, you're accessing the app or the website
Exactly.
from whatever internet-connected device you happen to choose, which increasingly is going to go beyond the smartphone, the tablet, the computer. I mean, somebody's going to be your refrigerator. I mean, it's just, again, you have this, this ubiquity in internet-connected devices. From in there, you're in a website, you hit click to communicate because you have a question. Right. You've been on somebody's digital store, their website. You're going to hit click to communicate. You're going to choose the mode of communication based upon personal preference and the limitations of the hardware portal. So if there's not a video, it's not a camera, well, you're only going to be doing audio. If there's no speaker and microphone, you're just going to be doing text. So, but the function of the communication being sort of something unique unto itself, I think is going to reduce over time.
So, but before I go on, and I want to let Bob and then Vic, we'll get to you. But one of my observations is that what people are looking for is to integrate communications and collaboration into business processes. That's the holy grail. And the question really becomes, is there one communications platform, or do you buy something and within that applications is a communications component, which creates the challenge of, well, if it's not the platform, what is it? I'm not suggesting there isn't a platform. I'm not suggesting that you'd say, no, I have to have this overlying platform because that's what the whole company uses. But in a particular application, I might have that ability to communicate with a colleague or with a customer through that application as opposed to, I've got to go back to what would have been traditionally a PBX, but these cloud platforms. So Bob, we'll turn it over to you.
I totally agree. I don't really have a whole lot to add to what everybody else said, but your point about, or what Alan was saying, the whole swivel seat of working within an application and swiveling to communicate makes no sense. Right. There's plenty of platform pieces that can be provided, and I just think of this as sort of, this question is sort of the it's sort of the tyranny of the or versus the opportunity of the and.
Right.
You know, we can do both.
So I'll simplify it a little bit, because I think the conversation was around, is there going to be a ubiquitous or a comprehensive communication and collaboration platform? And I think I'm with you, Sumita. Communications is much more than voice. It is all forms of collaboration. Alan, your point is, maybe it's standalone or maybe it's embedded. It can be both. But I mean, you used two very interesting examples. You pulled out your iPhone, and then there is the Android phone, and you called it an internet connector, right? Nobody calls it an internet connector. The last internet connector that there was the Newton. It's gone, right? So I think the concept of a communications platform where it's ubiquitous, voice, video, text, et cetera, and integrated, I think is key. But I'm 100% alignment with you, whether it's delivered as a standalone or delivered as embedded in an app, I think will be up to the user. And then actually this concept of best of breed versus one integrated solution, I think Bob, you and Sumita have answered it with literally billions and billions of dollars of shareholder valuation. Not too many people know about Lotus 1-2-3 or WordPerfect or CorelDRAW. Everybody's heard of Microsoft Office. Everybody's heard of G Suite. I would bet you the majority of the people are either using G Suite or Microsoft Office. There's no best of breed anything. It's a Microsoft-owned solution, all integrated together. Yes, it integrates with all different types of things, and you can use it to do a lot of things. G Suite is fantastic. I mean, for collaboration, communication, all kinds of stuff. But it's an integrated Google solution which integrates with other things. But at the core, the best-of-breed vendors one by one have disappeared because people want one common platform. How the platform is consumed, whether it's consumed through an independent device or some form as a standalone platform, or whether it's consumed as part of an integrated solution into somebody's embedded software, that I think is open for debate and will continue, and I think we agree on that.
I think a question I would sort of pose to the panelists, Jim, I'm going to take over your job now. How many seats are there of basically of Teams or 365, and how many of G Suite?
So Teams, I think we're announcing over 15 million seats.
Right, but in total, like the 365 users is 1 billion or 1.2 billion, whatever.
Yeah,
same on G Suite. I mean,
yeah. No, well, if you include consumer properties and things like that, sure.
Yeah, I mean, Gmail over 1 billion users,
right.
Drive over 1 billion users, so they're big platforms.
So my point is only knowledge, and there's principally used by knowledge workers. Knowledge workers have made a decision of there are portals by which there is huge installed bases. So my point is, you're going to be working in some of those, and increasingly you're going to be working in. You're in websites. Increasingly, you're in social. Many people are now not even. They don't even have a URL. They just have a Facebook page as an example. Again, it's now communications under the covers on what someone else has already made the selection of their portal, where their homepage is effectively. That's my point. As opposed to saying, I've got 500,000 or 1 million seats over here of my pure communication that's going to require the swivel chair, I don't think that is a particularly good bet relative to when you have 1 billion of something, as an example.
No, and actually, look, there are 500 billion iPhones and Android phones. And a communication app that combines everything together and ties into your entire corporate communication system basically enables what Bob was heading towards, as well as you, Gordon, which is the whole concept of the mobile worker. 500 billion plus iPhones, Android phones, and some other ancillary phones now is a ready-made portal with all the things that you need. You put your communications platform essentially there, tied into whether it's G Suite or whether it's your Microsoft Outlook or 365. Suddenly, you have opened up the power of everybody. right? And so that's where I'm kind of going towards. You'll see communication that is an integrated app, how it's consumed, whether it's consumed embedded into G Suite or 365, or whether it's embedded into an iPhone or Android phone, but it opens up the entire communication enterprise. I think that's
I think you're both right to some degree. And here's what I would say: 5G is going to change the way we all put our apps here. Right? As users, we're tired of having to download an app for everything. Right? So think about 5G. Your applications are now on the edge. Right? And then you integrate, certain capabilities within the phone itself. So as an example, we announced with Samsung this morning that the Samsung dialer on the Samsung phone is going to be a fully integrated PBX, right? To your point, some simplicity in how you leverage the device. But as you move the applications more to the edge, right, that's going to completely change how we use and manage those applications. It's going to change how we manage security. The device itself doesn't have to be so secure anymore. The application at the edge has to be secure. So I think there's truth in both of what your points are in terms of how we drive forward, and it's going to change. 4G really enabled the video content on the phone and the massive growth of those streaming content providers. 5G is going to continue to do that, and companies that are big into AI are going to leverage that type of technology to deliver more rich experience in the 5G world. So I think this is dramatically going to change how we view the mobile workforce in the future.
I think that's a great point. I feel like it just comes to looking at where where technology is heading overall and where users are heading. So if you look at users, increasingly mobile remote workforce, right? 50% by 2020. If you look at technology, bandwidth continues to increase. So something like video conferencing, which lets you have so much higher bandwidth communication, I feel like that's really important to consider as you're going forward. So if you put those together, then I think you end up with cloud native, being able to access it from anywhere, having the capability to extend your business applications. We are talking about G Suite and we are talking about Microsoft, but there are many, many specialized applications, right? There are applications, if you think about contact centers, which we don't have, as Google, where we are partnering with our partners, or you go into customer relationship management, manufacturing applications. So I think you look at those and then you figure out a cloud-based solution and you start moving in that direction.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Let's shift up the conversation a little bit. I know we talked about context, Sri. You mentioned context within a conversation and in a collaboration session. You mentioned AI. Our enterprises at this point, as we're thinking about communications and collaboration and building intelligence into those applications, are they asking the right questions? One, about the capabilities that they're going to be getting, how they're going to use those. I think, Sri, you used the term civility in our discussions. Are they using them in the right way? What are their concerns? Are they asking the right questions? What about securing all of this as well? Do you want to lead us off there, Sri?
Yeah, I can. It's an interesting topic to lead us off, and will lead to many a good conversation. I think back to the conversation, Beth, you and I had on AI and, in general, intelligence in the enterprise setting, which is very different than the consumer setting per se, but more and more getting seeded into the enterprise, which is a combination of internal data and external data coming together for in-context, for work, reliable sources of information per se. And there is a question of the individual in the enterprise and the enterprise itself. Like, what's the morality and civility of my information being shared within the context of the enterprise for the greater good of the enterprise versus the choices I make as an individual, right? So that is something that's upon us quite a bit. You asked a couple of questions there. You had a part A, part B, part C in your question. And let's address the second part of your question around security, right? So you talked about enterprises and the need for security. I think the only thing I can say, which I'm sure all of the panelists here will agree with, is IT organizations and enterprises in general should not take their eyes off security. Never have a complacent moment. You're only, if you think you're secure, there's a whole bunch of stuff lurking around the corner. So level of preparedness has to amplify on a daily basis. Think of it this way. Our technology capabilities have gone up 10-fold, 15-fold. Bob and I, we've talked about this topic. It's only going to go on. The more we use technology, the more we need to keep our eyes on things like privacy and security. I'll just use that as a starting framing, if that makes sense, Beth.
Okay.
I was going to say a few things. You asked what the customers should ask for or should be aware of. You know, a lot of the world's business data sits in the Microsoft cloud. And first and foremost, it's the customer's data. It's not Microsoft's data. And that's a really important consideration to ask of any of the panelists up here about what is happening with my data that's stored in your cloud, because it requires data to have AI. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we laid out that a lot of a lot of fellow companies are jumping on with are principles around AI. Does it take care of fairness? Is it reliable and safe? Is it secure and does it honor privacy? Is it inclusive? Is it transparent? And finally, does it promote accessibility? These are the six, the actual 6 principles that we've laid out. And again, industry partners are jumping onto that as well. But you should be asking customers that are touting this use of AI what their principles around AI are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one final thought I would just add is technologies like AI, technology in general, I think the one question you have to ask yourself is business value yet a leading indicator versus a lagging indicator to technology itself? Mm-hmm. That is something that should be top of mind to CIOs and enterprises in general to ask of us as vendors.
Well, I've got an AI question for you, and it's an interesting thing because we know AI is going to be a big topic here, and it's a good question to ask Google. So what do you think the influence is going to be on AI's influence is going to be on communications and collaboration, particularly in contact center and meeting rooms?
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, so AI is becoming more and more real. It's beginning to influence a lot of our products in a very positive way. AI, it's very powerful technology. And if you think, some of the things which we have done with AI recently, just to give examples, and I do think it takes effort, to your point, to make sure that AI is actually useful and it's providing business value. But examples like Gmail Smart Reply, it's become hugely popular. We are using AI for preventing phishing attacks right now. So, so those are good uses. Spam filtering, those are good uses. So I do think AI is becoming more real. We absolutely have to take care of customers' data and make sure it's their own data. That's a principle we have to abide by, and we do. Yeah. Coming back to meeting rooms and contact center. On meeting rooms, or if you think about meeting rooms, there are it's very good applications because resources are very tight and there's a lot of information being generated in real time. So if you think about people's time, if you think about room utilization, all of those things are really important for organizations. If you think about like transcriptions or conversations, what is the privacy around it? What information are you extracting? How are you making the meeting more productive? Those are also great examples. So I think those are some areas where for example, in our Hangouts Meet product, which is video conferencing, we are beginning to apply some of these things. And one example, like I think Google 20,000 rooms, and through room utilization, we are freeing up 60,000 meeting hours per month already. So we test them out internally. So that was on the meeting room. I think there's a lot which we can do. We are getting started. On the contact center, so this is a great example because from a Google Cloud, a Google perspective, we very much want AI to be in our products, but we also want to enable partners to be able to use them broadly. So we are partnering with Alan on Vonage on contact center AI. And again, contact center is a great application. It's a scaled application. So one of the things is you call a contact center, you never want to be put on hold. So through natural sounding languages or through really being able to extract intent from that conversation, you can get this always on agent that can respond to you. So we are heading in that direction. Or assistive knowledge finding. If you get to an agent, how do you make it more useful so that they have the right information at their fingertips? How do you do sentiment analysis? So I think the possibilities are endless. I think they're becoming real. And I think, again, to the audience, I would say is as you are thinking about your product roadmaps or where you want to take your organization, you should be thinking about the AI roadmaps for the products.
Yeah, and I think I've got a even more interesting example, Sumita, that you and I were talking about. Google and I and us just partnered, which is now beta, and we're all hoping that everything gets released by, but the first customer is a company called Swale Heating in the UK. Very practical example. They manage boilers in England, and they had a major cold wave. And in real time, using Google AI in our contact center, you could detect when people calling say, hey, my boiler is exploding. In real time, they could start to route the call to a totally different queue and say, this is the 5 things you need to do instantly. This is real. It's happening now. Swale Heating is partnering it right now. And I think this particular example will be at the Google Next conference that we'll be talking about. But the whole idea of AI is call deflection on contact center. How do you make the contact center agent so much more effective? And then, Bob, building on your point, I love the way you kind of said it, because I think the concept that this is all our customers' data. We're all fiduciaries for that data. Exactly. I mean, we all, if you think about this concept of a core communication and collaboration platform, every voice, every video, every chat, every call recording, every interaction that happens in an enterprise globally all sits on our platform. Now, the purpose of this is you expose that to your customer with different dashboards, different machine learnings to get more efficiency, but you cannot be ever using that data outside of providing value to your customers. So I think your point is exactly right on.
We've got other questions we want to get to, and this is a good topic, but I think if you don't, Beth, you think we should move on?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So an important question to me, Bob, is, and it's for the industry, are things we should be doing or the vendors should be doing to try to take all this data and improve our lives to make it a little more efficient? We're all on 24/7. We can't go on vacation without checking email every day.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a huge opportunity to help improve people's well-being with this data. If you think about architecture inside of buildings, there's been a lot of work to make things a very calming place. I think most of us would say when we get in front of our PC or even our phone, it's not very calming in terms of this information overload coming at us. So I think there's a huge opportunity to do that. First of all, I'll take a plug for meetings. Come to our keynote tomorrow. We're going to talk a lot about how digitizing meetings can absolutely transform the way they work. But one of the ways that we do this within Microsoft 365 is we have something called My Analytics. And a case study was done by Macy's as they deployed Microsoft 365. They essentially wanted to give people more time at home, so less time working after hours, more focus hours in the workplace, meaning 2 hours of uninterrupted time, and less time in meetings. And they did it using something we call My Analytics, which is essentially your Fitbit for work. It just gives you insight into where you are spending your time. And based on giving that information to the end users, not dictating what they should do, but simply giving them the information to take control of their time at work, they reduced the amount of time in meetings, they gave them more focused hours within the workplace where they were uninterrupted, and they spent less time working after hours on work things. And that to me is driving, personal incomes, not outcomes, versus sort of business outcomes. I think really humanizing the experience is really important.
Great.
Yeah. I think as an industry, it's incumbent upon us all. It's not so much about privacy, although it's a key factor. It's about trust in our brands. At the end of the day, our users have to have trust in the brand. And so if you come back to some of the points made earlier, AI, first of all, is going to completely transform the way we create. Call center evolved to contact center. Contact center is evolving to customer success hubs, right? And the whole deployment of AI, and your point, Bob, about you don't have AI without data. So, my background is customer experience, so I know the value of data, and I want that quick and easy, easy button to push to get service. Proactive service is better than no service. But until we build the trust with our base, whether that's a B2B, B2C base, on the privacy factor, it's going to be hard to get there because we need the data to give the consumer or the user what they want in the end, which is oftentimes going to be driven by AI.
Well, we've got you, and since you're the mobile expert we're looking to, by the way, what role do you think communication and collaboration will play in mobile first, and how is mobility going to change over time? You've already mentioned 5G.
Yeah, well, we touched on that a little bit, and I think it's going to completely change. And by the way, I don't think we necessarily know yet. We have a lot of ideas of how it's going to change. At CES earlier this year, we announced the 5G Challenge, where any entrepreneur is welcome to compete for $1 million to answer that very question, as to how 5G is going to change the world. So in October, we'll announce a $1 million.
Just saying dramatically isn't going to be the answer.
Yeah.
$1 million dramatically.
So
It changed my life.
yeah. So,
You and I
so
collaborate.
there's a lot of things in terms of just rich content, and there's things that have to come with 5G to enable, such as RCS, and as HTML evolves, and we can leverage native applications on the phone to drive those experiences. Or between us, how many apps do we ask our customers to download, right? So if we can leverage the native capability on the phone, and your application is now on the edge, I think that's going to dramatically change how we deliver service to the device or portal. And then it also changes, how we view security. I'm not saying the device is going to go from smart to dumb, but as things move to the edge, you're going to have to secure this a little bit to a lesser extent.
And that does bring us to the end of our time here. So I really appreciate all of your perspectives, sharing with our audience. Audience, how about we give them a big round of applause?